you'll be playing. Are you staying? But for the prayer, because I may forget the words. Oh, let's get सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान की, श्री गौर निताय की, श्री प्रभुपाद की. Jayo Jayo Gaurachande Arati Koshoba. Jayo Jayo Gaurachande Arati Koshoba. Janavita Tavane Jagamanaroba. Dakinani dai Jan Bamegadadara. Nikate Advaita Srini Vasajatradara. Posiyache Gaura Chan Ratna Simhasane. Gaura Chan Ratna Simhasane. Arati Korena Brahma Adideva Gane. Narahari Adikori Chamaradulaya. Chamaradulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Bashu Koshadigaya. Sanjaya Mukunda Bashu Goshadigaya. Sanka Baje Kanta Baje Baje Karatala Sanka Baje. Madhura Mridanga Baje Paramarasala. Sanka Baje Kanta Baje Madhur 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 Baje Kanta Baje Madhur 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 Baje Sanka Baje Kanta Baje Madhur 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 Baje. Madur madur bhaje, sanka bhaje, ganta bhaje, madur 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 bhaje. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Bahukoti Chandrajini Vadana Udvala Gala Deshe Banamala Kore Jalamala Shiva Sukha Narada Preme Gada Gada Bhakti Vinoda Deke Gaurara Sampada Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arati Koshobha Janavita Tavane Jagamana Loba Gaurange Aratik Shobha Jagajanamana Loba Gaurange Aratik Shobha Jagajanamana Loba Gaurange Aratik Shobha Jagajanamana Loba Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminithi Namine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschata Dashatarine. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Chaitanya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Wait. Do I wait for the concha? Yeah. Okay. I mean, you can still like the when he's funny, but a little bit more Maha mantra.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you.
Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Shri Radhe. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman 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 Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Nitagora Haribo, 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 Nitagora Haribo. Nitagora Haribo, 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 Nitagora Haribo. Nitai Gore Haribo ki Jai. Narasimhaya La 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 Dadaine Hiranyakashipu Vakshaha Shilatankanakalaye Ito Narasimha Parato Narasimha Yato yato yami tato Narasimha Pahe Narasimha Hidaye Narasimha Pahe Narasimha Hidaye Narasimha Pahe Narasimha Hidaye Narasimha Narasimhamatim Sharanam Prapadim Tava Kalakamalavane Nakam Abhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tano Bringa Keshavatita Narahari Rupa Te Jagadisha Hare Te Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Yeshavatita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Ya Narasimhadev, 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 Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Bhagavan ki jai, Lord Maharaj ki jai. Jai, jai, jai. I'm not afraid that you can't sing on my own yet.
Thank you so much for having the heart to let us sing.
It's a no-brainer.
Thank you. How are you feeling?
I'm okay, I think. Up and down. I'll probably we can do another talk then. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, just chant for him too. Just pictures of just for his soul to go back home and to birth again.
I'm very lucky.
Okay. What's up, just Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira natira vanachare Yamunatira vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So on behalf of the devotees, I'd like to say thank you for them giving me a chance to share a few reflections on the contents of the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of Krishna, where he gives advice to Arjuna on what he needs to do for his life. As we mentioned time and time again, the Bhagavad Gita is really relevant and applicable for us in this day and age. And we get to see how relatable the contents that Krishna gives Arjuna are with our own lives. Today we're going to be going through the text 39 of chapter 3, which is entitled Karma Yoga. Avritam Gyanametena Gyanino Nityavairina Kamarupena Konteya Dushpurena Nalena Cha Avritam Gyanametena Gyanino Nityavairina Kamarupena Konteya Dushpurena Nalena Cha Avritam Gyanametena Gyanino Nityavairina Kamarupena Konteya Dushpurena Nalena Cha Avritam Gyanametena Gyanino Nityavairina Kamarupena Konteya Dushpurena Nalena Cha. Word for word translation. Avritam, covered. Jnanam, pure consciousness. Etena, by this. Jnanina, of the knower. Nityavairina, by the eternal enemy. Kamarupena, in the form of lust. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti. Dushpurena, never to be satisfied. Analena, by the fire. Cha, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. So translation, thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Purport. It is said in the Manu Smriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of a living entity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Let's read the translation. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Vishesha Srinivadi Pashtiti Shatarani. Hare Krishna. Yes, so for all who have joined in the temple room and online, thank you so much. Try to share some few thoughts on this wonderful verse. I'm familiar with this verse because every time when I'm doing, when I was doing Mongol transfer, I'd have a small break once some of the articles of the Lordships have come, and myself and a devotee known as Abhay would read these verses from, I think it's from text 36, where Arjuna asks, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Why? Because this is something that I can relate to. And I'm sure anyone who's in a material body as well can testify to, that sinful activities feel so innate within us that at times trying to avoid them seems impossible. It seems as if we're being forced to engage in these activities because that's just the natural precept of our senses. The predilections of our senses encourage us to engage in sense gratification. If they're senses, they're meant to be enjoyed in a particular fashion. So naturally, automatically, the body will be geared towards some certain sinful activities as if engaged by force. And so Krishna nicely starts to explain that actually, it's because the living entity, he earlier on explained that the Jivatma, the spirit soul, is encompassed in this body. And so the living entity becomes covered by his eternal enemy, which is known as lust. Here in this verse, Krishna says, Avitam Jnanam Etena, Jnanam Etena, Jnanino Nitya Vairina. So the wise living entity is pure consciousness. It's interesting because Jnanam means one with knowledge. Prabhupada describes Jnanam here, one with pure consciousness, preluding to the fact that only through the knowledge can we be able to purify ourselves by having a proper understanding of how we should behave. So he somewhat uses these words synonymously in this verse. What happens to him? He becomes covered by his eternal enemy, Nitya Vairina. So not just Vairina, not just an enemy, but his eternal enemy. This enemy you're bound by as soon as you get this body. And so we have to identify that actually we're not safe from this enemy. It reminds me of a pastime of Srila Vyasadeva with Jamie Muni? Or Jamie Muni? Srila Vyasadeva had a disciple. I'm sure you probably are familiar with this pastime. I forget his name. Something Muni. Jamie Muni. Jamini Muni. I forget his name. And his disciple went and told him, Gurudev, I think I've conquered lust. I've gone above it. What is this lust to a person like me? You know, he was a sannyasi, he was a muni, he was a sadhu. In Vyasadev's ashram, he had, his quarters, and then had quarters for all his disciples, you know. And most of his disciples were there were sannyasis, they were munis. They never contemplated marriage after going through brahmacharya. They decided full on that that's the rest of their life. And so the munis had their own quarters where they would stay and have a comfortable space to perform their bhajan. So he tells Vyasadeva, Gurudev, I've conquered lust. Lust doesn't affect me. What is lust? Please. Vyasadeva doesn't respond. Srila Vyasadeva looks at him and is like, okay, no problem. Knowing that obviously as his spiritual master, because he's Tattva-darshina, he has a vision of pure knowledge, he will be able to enlighten him that actually for so long as you encompass in this material body, lust will still be something that you have to fight. So days go by, and then all of a sudden there is some torrential rainfall that falls around their space. Heavy, heavy rainfall. Fortunate for him, he's in his kutir, but not so fortunate enough because someone starts knocking at the door. And as soon as the door is opened, he sees a beautiful damsel covered with water all over her body because she's been rained on. And her in her desperation is telling him, Hare Krishna Muni, I know this is an awkward situation. Look at the time, the place, the circumstance. It's raining, it's super dark outside. I don't know how to get through. I'm a woman, I need to be protected. Please, give me some shelter. How am I supposed to survive? He's a Muni. Munis are not supposed to be in contact with women in a personal space. Here she is asking, please, no, let me just come and stay and until the rain subsides, then I can leave, right? So he's thinking, I'm a Muni. I shouldn't even be looking at her for so long. But at the same time, where is my compassion? I'm a devotee of Krishna. My Gurudev is Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva is the embodiment of compassion. Why? Because he decided to write the whole Vedic scriptures for the benefit of the human society, isn't it? So I have to be a compassionate disciple. Otherwise, people might question my spiritual master. And the last thing that a disciple wants is for the spiritual master's integrity to be questioned based on their behavior. So they will always work to reflect and represent their spiritual master in the best way, which makes a lot of sense. Imagine if the next morning, they wake up and the people are saying, oh, we saw that your disciple was, hanging around with this woman in his house. Yes, it was raining, and so she sought shelter, and he gave it to her. What kind of a Muni is he? And what kind of a guru are you that these things are being sanctioned? So to avoid such kind of things, the Muni is conscious that actually this is my situation. So what does he do? He says, okay, I can't let you come in and stay with me in the same space. Mataji, I understand, it's raining, it's heavy, but I can't. So what I'll do is I will go outside and you can come in and stay inside. And you lock the door. And you make sure that anyone knocks this door, you shouldn't open. Don't open. Up until the rain subsides, then you can open and get your way out. Mataji's like, no problem, Hare Krishna. Walks inside, locks the door. Now the Muni is outside of his own kutir. It's raining. Probably it's difficult for him to focus on his meditation or anything. Why? Because he's been distracted by this beautiful damsel. And although the beautiful damsel is locked within the room, the vision he has still carried of her remains with him. And so he starts contemplating, and we know, Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsa, from contemplation is where everything begins. All the madness begins from contemplation. So he starts saying, actually, she's a pretty woman. How meek and humble she was. Actually, another thing I've missed out is when he was telling her, you know what, you stay inside and I stay outside. She was like, no, how can I do that? I might as well just go. It's not right, I can't do this, But he persuaded her, please, no, Mataji, I have to have compassion. You're in a difficult circumstance. You're a mother, you need to be protected. These people understood that mothers have to be sheltered and protected. They're not to be left outside by themselves. Not to say that they lack their own independence, but mothers have to be protected, and that's the compassion of the heart of a person who's self-realized, that they want to protect everyone, including the ones who could be vulnerable. So he's contemplating, she was so meek, so humble. I told her to come in and I would get out and she was refusing. What wonderful qualities she has. I can imagine she must be so understanding that if I was to ever be in the same space with her, she would understand not to put me in anxiety. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. I don't know if this is how the story is given. I've heard it from different sources and everyone has their own juice. So I carried on with the same juice but keeping the essence. That's the main thing. So he's contemplating all these different things. As I say, dhyato vishayam pumsa. From dhyato, contemplation is where it all begins. And all of a sudden, he felt, no, I need to be in contact with her. I feel like, I have to. This is an opportunity. How many people get such an opportunity that a damsel comes walking into my space? So he starts knocking. Gong, 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 gong. She keeps quiet. Gong, 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 gong. No response. Gong, 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 gong. It's me, the Muni. I told you not to open for anyone, but please open for me. She's there inside like, no, you told me not to open for anyone, so I'm not going to open. But no, I'm the one who told you to open. I'm the one who told you to lock the door. Don't open for anyone else but me. I'm the one who told you, so open for me. And she says, no, you told me, you gave me clear instructions. Your instructions were with proper gyan, or with proper chakshush. You gave me proper instructions so that we're not getting into a risky situation here. But he's like, no, open up, open up right now. And she could feel from the inside that his fire was burning. His fire was burning. But she refused. She became adamant and refused. Up until the rain stopped. But this time the rain is even going more and more. The rain is not even able to cool the fire of lust that is embodied within this Muni at this moment. So much so that what does he decide to do? He decides to jump onto the roof of the hut and start undoing the thatches. And then jumps in. And when he jumps in, he's like a hyena, tongue out, ready. This is my opportunity. And as soon as he goes and he touches her, alas, she transformed into Vyasadeva, right in front of his face. Just imagine the embarrassment, how that must have been. I can't imagine. It's unfathomable. And Vyasadeva was there telling him, my Muni, my disciple, I thought you had conquered lust. What's going on? You gave clear instructions, look at you jumping into this space, fighting. And that was a lesson to the Muni that actually lust is not something you can control for so long as you're encompassed in a material body or you're not fully engaged in pure devotional service. And even those personalities who are not fully engaged in devotional service fear the onslaughts of Maya. Srila Prabhupada was an example. One time Srila Prabhupada was praying so heavily in front of the lordships. And then Mother Yamuna goes to Srila Prabhupada and asks, Srila Prabhupada, what are you praying for? I just want to know out of curiosity. And Prabhupada says, so that I don't fall down. Because lust will always keep on attacking constantly. And so the wise living entity's pure knowledge, pure consciousness, becomes covered by this eternal enemy. He has proper gyan, has proper understanding. And we can relate to this also. We know the principles. We know what we're supposed to do. But somehow or other, we get covered. Somehow or other, in that moment, Maya comes and she's able to intelligently convince us that this is the best thing to do. How does she work? At times she convinces you that, finish with it. Get over and done with it so you don't have to think about it again. But then here we get told, it is never satisfied. Kama rupena konteya dushpurena nelena cha. This lusty form, kama rupena, O son of Kunti, dushpurena, never to be satisfied. Analena cha, just like fire. So, you might think, okay, fine, let me just indulge, It's just one drink. It's just, it's just one more look. I'll look at her just a little bit longer, just a few more minutes. It's not going to disturb me. I'll be over and done with it. She's not even that pretty anyway. The mind will convince all these different things. But what we're being informed here by Krishna is that just by you engaging with that energy, it's never going to be satisfied. If anything, it's going to be burning even more and more and more and more like fire, non-stop. And so we should be firmly situated in the understanding that we should never contemplate. Our protection comes from never ever contemplating. Because the people who end up falling back into those traps, it's because they've come into a position where they contemplate, I was listening to a talk by His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj, and he was saying, people understand that sinful activities lead them to miserable circumstances. They understand it not just through the scriptures, but through first-hand experience. But because of identification of the body, the senses never remind you of displeasurable circumstances. They only remind you of blissful circumstances. And so one actually forgets the results or the byproducts of these sense gratificatory activities. And so we can't just rely on the knowledge of our past alone. That's why we're also told, Param Drishva Nivartate, you have to get a higher taste for something else so that naturally the predilections of your senses and what they were used to can be minimized to nothing else but those that are transcendental if you get a higher taste. Prabhupada gives this example that just like in the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Sex life is actually the biggest marketing tool. So much so that even in marketing contents for children in this day and age, subtle sex impulses are being instigated. It's so scary to see and to observe. As soon as you walk onto the high street, you'll see, the presentation of not only the elderly, but also the youth, the young ones, the most vulnerable. Is so exposing. Recently, I remember seeing something that was being shared on Facebook of, what was it? It was getting signatures, gathering signatures to stop something from airing. And I was wondering, okay, because this was being shared by devotees as well. So obviously when devotees share, there's something interesting. So I peered into the depth, and what were they stopping? They were stopping a show about 5 children who sneak out of their homes and go into the music dance industry, and they make it big. And have to do things that young youthful girls should not be doing at all. And so it was hypersexualized, very, very lusty motivated. And even before the movie had launched, it had already gotten so much attention. And that just goes to show how much lust is a marketing tool in this day and age that we live in. And Prabhupada is telling us this. Prabhupada is saying this so many years ago, 50 years ago. Prabhupada is saying this. And today we see it happening so clearly, so vividly. But fortunate for us that we're sheltered by the scriptures of Srila Prabhupada, we're sheltered by the knowledge. We can get to understand this and therefore not put ourselves in a position where we can be entrapped by these. And so those who are disobedient, Prabhupada says, those who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Who are the disobedient ones? The ones who actually, to some extent, do not take to devotional service, do not want to surrender, do not want to give their lives up to a higher cause, do not understand that they're actually minute beings subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They end up becoming shackled by this sex life because they have nothing higher to anticipate for. So for them, the predilections of their senses become their driving tool. And just like the horses in the diagram of the horses, each sense is driving into each and every direction, trying to satisfy the body, where the soul, who's seated on the chariot of this body, the city of 9 gates, is suffering. And so I guess this just becomes one of those verses that encourage us to understand fully that really lust or anything that's enjoying without Krishna will never be satisfied, however much we try. I always give that example of when I was young and I went with my mom to the supermarket, and then we first saw some cotton candy, and I told her, Mom, I want this cotton candy. And she said, okay, fine, I'll get you the cotton candy. And she bought it for me. And so I thought the taste for something sweet in my mouth would be dissipated. But then later on, we walked through and we saw ice lollies. And I told her, Mom, please, I'd like an ice lolly. And she was like, but you already got cotton candy. Now you want an ice lolly. Okay, if I give you the ice lolly, are we finished? Fine, yes, Mom. Gets me the ice lolly. We walk down later and we see this whole big truck that has tons of candy. And what do I see? A jawbreaker. And I'm like, Mom, please give me a jawbreaker. Please, I want to get that jawbreaker. But I thought you said you'd be satisfied with the ice lolly. Yes, but Mom, please, I want the jawbreaker. So she gets me the jawbreaker. And then we go on and we go on. And then at the end of the corner of the mall, we see a man who's selling roasted maize. So now the sweet is finished from my tongue. Now I want the savory. Mom, please get me the roasted maize with the lemon and the chili, please. Mom's like, I thought you'd be satisfied with all these things. I'm having to spend more and more. You're never getting satisfied. That is the nature of this material world, never satisfying us. And I think we have, Krishna intelligently presents these points constantly to remind us, especially in this series of verses, that actually we should try to avoid this and be convinced that every time when we try to enjoy our senses without Krishna, we will never be satisfied. It will never happen. It will never work. You've tried it time and time and again. You've tried it in multiple lifetimes, millions of lifetimes at that, and it still has never worked. Do not fall into the trap. Take shelter of Krishna consciousness and transcendentalize your senses. And that's why we're so grateful to Prabhupada, because he created a space and spaces for all of us all over the world where we can be able to live a life that is protected without, if we follow properly, we're protected from the onslaughts of lust. Or we're helped to channel this lust in proper applicable ways that do not lead us to damnation, but lead us to being delivered. And so all glories to Srila Prabhupada for creating that kind of a lifestyle for us. But it's an important verse. I would always repeat these verses, and I was instructed by one of my seniors here, His Grace Gol Krishna Prabhu, that at any time I should always recite these verses. They're important to remind us that lust is a problem. Why do we feel that we're not getting attached to Krishna? Why do we still feel that we've been practicing for so long, yet lusty desires are still permeating through our mind? Because we're not endeavoring with intelligence. We're not enthusiastic. Prabhupada says enthusiasm in act of instruction is endeavoring with intelligence. So we're not intelligently endeavoring. We're endeavoring. But when we have intelligence, then that's proper utsaha. And so we have to always evaluate and see how can we apply ourselves in a way that we're protected from these disturbances. Prabhupada said that, I think there's a past time where Prabhupada was just leaving the airport in America, and all his disciples were there, hundreds of them, paying obeisances to him. And then I think he was talking to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, not too sure. But yeah, and he's telling Tamal Krishna Maharaj was telling him, or this personality was telling him that, all these people are just surrendered unto you. They just love you so much. And Prabhupada said, they love me because I have conquered lust. And then he paused, and after a while he said, actually, I've not conquered lust. I just do not have time for it. I'm so busy engaged in devotional service, I do not have any time for lust. And we can also see with our personalities here who are constantly engaged in devotional service, what time would they have to be focused on such degraded mentalities and degraded activities? Because they're so engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. And so I guess for someone like myself, this is preaching to myself, that I actually have to be engaged as much as I can so that I don't have time for any of these thoughts, desires to fructify. And from Dhyato coming all the way to Krodha and me, going back to the material pool out of my anger and frustration. And so by the protection of the devotees, and by the mercy of the devotees and the mercy of the Lord and Prabhupada, of course, we can be able to be protected from the onslaughts of lust and carry on in our Krishna consciousness in a way that's pleasing to Krishna and to the spiritual master, and ultimately to Krishna. And then we can go back home. It says, Krishna consciousness works if you work it. So we need to work it in such a way that we're protected from this demon. We're protected from this energy that reminds us, as we heard from Srila Prabhupada's class today, light without light, without darkness, you can't appreciate the light. So because we've understood what lust can do, now we can be able to appreciate Krishna consciousness and how it protects us. So we shouldn't be stubborn, thinking that we can still enjoy or squeeze out more pleasure from material energy, but actually just surrender that to Krishna and perform pure devotional service, or gradually bring ourselves to a platform where we can do so. And then we will not be entrapped by this Nitya Vairina, eternal enemy known as lust. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I don't know if you have any questions, comments.
I was just wondering, is there any significant reason why you would do that during mana transfer, to read these verses especially?
During the transfer? No, I don't think it was just because it was just any time when I got free time. And because we didn't have enough free time to chant around, but we had free time to chant some verses. Yeah, so.
Why exactly these ones?
Because these are the ones that affect us the most, or at least me. Having spoken to Prabhu, he mentioned, these are some good verses to recite because lust is our enemy. It's what's stopping us. To some degree, we become limited in our advancement because still, to some extent, the lusty desires convince us that we can still gratify our senses in one way, form, or another. But really, it's just adding more wood to the fire, which will keep on burning like that. So it was just always a reminder that even in Krishna's house, we ought to be careful because this insatiable enemy will, creep up and disturb. And I've noticed even whilst engaged in devotional service, the lusty thoughts can still permeate in our consciousness. So it's just always good to remind ourselves, and actually not just during the transfer, but all throughout. Whenever we get a chance, it should be powerful verses to read. And probably I should make that a tradition for myself, to read these verses as often as I can, to remind myself that actually it is lust that is stopping me, and so I need to be situated, because the rest of the verses Krishna is explaining to us. I don't want to go through the verses of the people giving in the future, but Krishna explains to us that what do we need to do in 41? Regulate the senses. And if we have regulated senses, we've been given a system by Prabhupada, then we do it. So it encourages us as well to carry on with the process and understanding that the process can actually work to get us out of this entanglement. So it's just like a constant reminder like that. Yeah.
Because it's interesting that even intelligence is a sitting place of that lust.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So if our consciousness is covered by lust, and lust is permeating through our consciousness, then our intelligence looks for ways to facilitate that lust. That's how I understand it. So intelligence, okay, so, below the intelligence is the mind, isn't it? So if the mind is contemplating, if it's, dayato vishayam pumsa, it started contemplating, then, and it's engaged in the lusty energy or in the lusty thoughts, then the intelligence looks, because what does the intelligence do? It picks from what you're presenting it as an impetus in the mind and picks the most viable, the most important. So the intelligence will pick, what it is to engage with based on the lusty things that you've given. So unless you're strongly situated without lust, or if let's say you're strongly engaged in devotional service and you have more positive thoughts than lusty thoughts, then your intelligence is rooted in the mode of goodness. So it will always remind you, no, don't even dare contemplate. But as soon as you've contemplated, the intelligence starts to work out situations on how you can execute this lust. And you'll notice there's this thing, we were having a sangha and they were talking about sneaky bhav. Yeah, it was like a term coined by some devotees, sneaky bhav, where you're looking for sneaky ways to enjoy your senses in a way that you're not noticed. And that takes intelligence. So intelligence becomes the sitting place of this lust because you're in the wrong consciousness. You're looking for different ways to enjoy intelligently. And that's why I think Prabhupada also does say, if you fall down by mistake, that's okay. It was mistaken, mama maya duratyaya. But it becomes a problem if you're applying your intelligence in ways to fall down creatively. Then that's when it becomes a problem, because your mind has been enslaved by this lust, and so your intelligence is working to facilitate this lust effectively. Like that. That's how I understand it. I don't know if you have a different perspective.
No, makes sense, but it's just so intelligence is a sitting place of lust, but it doesn't mean that it's always there. You can't purify it, right?
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
it's just a
Yeah.
possibility that it's there, but at some point, you
Yeah.
kind of
If it's in darkness, then obviously the intelligence becomes exacerbated in lusty thoughts. If it's in the light, then it becomes accentuated in devotional thought. And so you'll see you're meditating more on how to engage in devotional service if it's in the light, and you'll be seeing if it's in the darkness how to engage in the sneaky bhav, enjoying things that people cannot see, being clandestine. And that's why I think the class that Prabhu gave was so nice, because he mentioned the 4 defects of humans, right? Imperfect senses. So automatically we're drawn to illusion. And with illusion, we'll make mistakes. And what we're going to do to deal with those mistakes, we're going to cheat. So if we become honest and are not clandestine, then we can be able to fight it. But the intelligence becomes so powerful to make us clandestine. So that's how we know we're ensnared. And so a person can read this and then reflect on themselves and understand, actually, I'm ensnared by this lust. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki.